Hi there. This week I caught up with Michael Miner, who is the founder and chief architect behind Hack Studio, an awesome new space in the Chicago area for middle school kids and kids of other ages to go and create. And not just create anything, but create what they want to create. In our conversation, we touch on the ideas that led him to found Hack Studio, some of the tensions that have arisen between the traditional model of education and some of the ways that Michael has designed Hack Studio, and his plans for the future. I really hope you enjoy our chat. Just as a little heads up, there was a small video glitch, so we pick up the conversation about 45 seconds in as he's talking about how his past experiences led him to some of the ideas that form the foundation of Hack Studio.
And over the course of a life of pursuing ideas that came from my heart and were defined and evaluated by me, and for which there was no real clear-cut path. Having done it in a number of different domains, it became pretty clear that there were common threads that ran between all of those types of endeavors. Over the course of time, working with Hack Studio, working with my team, we've kind of identified what that is and put a name to it. It's called an authentic pursuit. And it has those criteria. It comes from the heart of the pursuer. It's defined and evaluated by the pursuer, not someone else. And there's no clear-cut path to success that's apparent to the pursuer, at least in the beginning. And then working towards an authentic pursuit, regardless of the domain, comes with a common human struggle about not knowing what to do next, about doubting yourself, about doubting your abilities, about trying to iterate, fail, and work towards done. And a big piece of accomplishing an authentic pursuit, I've learned from doing them, and we've learned from stewarding them, just comes down to two main things: connection with other people and commitment to getting done. Everything else is ugly. It's just gonna be a problem. It's gonna be tough. There's gonna be a mess. You have to kind of embrace the mess and recognize that it's normal, and that's where the connection piece comes into it.
I love that idea of authentic pursuit. I want to come back to that, but before we jump into the meat of Hack Studio, how did the idea come about? I mean, has it been something you've been thinking about since had this childhood of learning by doing, or is it something that is pretty recent?
Yeah, it would have been. It's a culmination of kind of the way I've worked throughout my entire life and the influences that I've had. But there was one major event that kind of consolidated the concept as an opportunity for me. And it was when I was in grad school. And I was in a lecture for stone arch technology for architects. And there was some stuff written on the board that piqued my interest. And it made me ask a dumb question that the answer from the professor was not to answer the question, but to restate the question back to me. And I basically said, is this harebrained idea possible? And they said, tell us next week. So it set me on a path it set me on an authentic pursuit, essentially. I had this thing I was interested in. I wanted to see if it could be done. I love the challenge. I love the idea of just jumping into something without knowing exactly how it's all going to turn out. It's exciting for me. And it was my favorite school project in my entire school career because it came from that passion place. And what happened was completely unexpected. And this is one of the great things about authentic pursuits, is the learning opportunities that arise are almost always surprising. And they are actually always exactly the way in which you need to grow in the moment that it happens. It always presents the gap between you and the things you want. And that gap tends to be the same thing a lot of times. So for me, what happened was it turned out that I needed math to solve this problem. But up until I gave myself this problem, or it was dropped in my lap by this professor, I had considered myself a bad math guy. I considered myself inept at math. And I had, been, I'm the creative guy. I can find other ways around it. And I was actually really good in the workshop, and I found all kinds of great ways around this stuff. But I thought I was bad at math. And so when I pursued this really interesting problem, the thing that happened to me that blew me away was, for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the math. I didn't want to not do it. I suddenly wanted to do it because it was now the way to achieve what I was really interested in. And at 22 years old, I couldn't remember how to isolate a variable. And I went, because I was so excited about solving this problem, I said, forget it, I'm gonna solve this. I went back and got a 7th grade textbook to learn math, like generally to learn math so that I could see if this structural idea would work. And so everything I learned from this textbook I was hanging on this passion project. And so everything I learned was a key, and the next little piece that was going to get me closer to what I wanted. And so I didn't notice, and I didn't notice how difficult the math was. I didn't notice that I hated it. It just, none of that even came into play. I was just bulldozing towards this goal that I had. And I've turned back in 3 weeks after deriving an equation that would give me the shape that I wanted and recognizing, oh my gosh, I can actually do math. I turned back, it was 3 weeks, I filled in all the math gaps that I had not been able to fill in the previous 7, 8 years of school. And I was like, there is a marked difference here in the approach to learning. I didn't concentrate on learning math. I concentrated on making a helix-shaped stone arch that was supported by a tension cable. That's what I was working on. But in 3 weeks, I got 7 years of math. And when I looked at that experience, so what is different about this? The difference is the learning that I was doing was filling the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be, where I knew I wanted to be. Whereas before, it was filling a potential gap between where I was and where the adults in my life thought I would probably want to be. Very different situation. And so I remember in that moment thinking, what if learning pedagogy, what if pedagogy actually, what if this was a valid pedagogy? What if this is a valid way to approach learning and growth? To say, let's not worry about subject matter right now. Let's start with passion. Let's decide where you want to go. And if you have something that you desperately want that is very authentic to you, and I just say go, you're going to get great learning. You're going to get sticky learning. You're going to get joyful learning. You're going to get, and you're going to end up getting exactly the learning you need. What I needed in that moment was math. Someone who was good at math, it was not going to be an issue for them. They were going to push right through it, and they were going to be able to figure this thing out. But for me, I've been avoiding math for my entire life, and they'd always told me I'd need it. Well, here was the moment. But the thing that blew me away was I wasn't hopeless in that moment. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't the problem that I had been told it was going to be. But because it was so meaningful to me, I was able to build that learning and growth. So the idea at that point was, could there be an institutional solution for learning and growth where that's how we work? We start with what we want and we just go. And then we look at what's going to happen next.
That's awesome. So I imagine when you have this idea and you reflect on your work there on that project, you kind of mentioned earlier, like sometimes that voice of fear or doubt when we figure out what we want comes into the back of our heads and then kind of shortcuts our ability to get going. Yeah. What's step 2 look like for you in this project? And what does step 2 look like with the students that you're working with once they figure out what they like?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is why connection and commitment are such big parts of the deal. Commitment is more or less built in if you have the right project. Having the right project is kind of a tough thing to come to. But if you have the right project, commitment's pretty much built in. But the way we involve others has a big effect on what's going on. When I was doing this helix shaped arch exploration. I was in a graduate architecture studio where everyone was trying to get their own ideas done. I had people who were in the arena with me. They were fighting things out for their own ideas, and mine was just another one of the difficult endeavors that were being engaged. And so there was a commonality around the struggle of trying to bring something forward that was coming from your heart. And I had to produce the work. This is a school. There's assignments due. There's grades being given, and so there was kind of a built-in accountability and commitment. In the typical authentic pursuit, though, we don't have that. You're not necessarily in a school setting, and so if you're going to run into those moments, which are just common human struggle moments. The typical response to any discomfort when someone isn't cracking the whip over your head is to back away from the discomfort. We're just kind of we're evolved. Our brains are evolved to do that for us. So it's actually not lack of willpower. It's actually survival skills that are functioning. Your brain's working when that happens to you. And so what we need in those moments, we need human connection to get through them. Human connection undoes all the things that discomfort when you're alone ends up doing to you. So you get uncomfortable and you get scared, and so you flee. Human connection makes you feel more safe and more comfortable. so when you know someone else has had the exact same experience, when you know what you're doing, you're not the only one who struggles in this way, that it's a typical part of the puzzle that keeps you in. Also, if you know you're part of a community and you're all influencing each other, then you know you've got a responsibility to the team to stay in the fight. So that helps. The other piece of the puzzle, so we do Hack Studio in groups, and the groups come together once a week for 2 hours, and they see the same people. So you start to get cohesion around this courageous act of pursuing something authentic. The other piece of the puzzle is that we have a framework that we put the work in. When you decide you want to do something, we call that your quest. Declaring your quest can be anything from very specific to very vague, but as long as you have a deep emotional connection to it, you want to do it. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be small. It can be something that's happening in the next 10 minutes, or it could be something that's going to keep you engaged for 10 years. But you need to know what that is. Then when you have your quest, you decide, what is one thing I can do to move myself in the direction of that quest? What am I ready to do? And our definition of ready is at peace with the possibility of it failing. If I can try this thing and it can fall on its face, I'm ready to try it. If I think about trying it, if it's going to all crumble and it's going to devastate me and I'm going to be psychologically scarred, or I'm going to leave this thing forever, well, we're not ready to try that yet. So what is the one thing that you're ready to do to move yourself in the direction of that quest? Once you've determined that, and you do it with your group, you work together to figure this out. Once you've done that, you write a definition of done. Every definition of done starts with the words, I will know I'm done when. And then we do the active, executable, verifiable criteria that will determine that thing done. And that takes a little process. Once we have a quest named, a do, the thing to do, and a definition of done for that thing to do, we lock it. No changing, no quitting, work on that and only that until it's done. And then it's just a process of iteration. And what that short circuits is what we call everything now paralysis. When you look at the whole span of everything you're trying to accomplish, especially when it's an authentic pursuit, someone hasn't already pre-cut the path for you, you go, oh my gosh, I could never do all of that. Like someone's quest may be to have a music career like Taylor Swift's. You'd be like, well, that's just crazy. But what they can do is say, I know I want that, and I'm ready to borrow a guitar. So I'll know I'm done when I have a guitar in my possession that I can use whenever I want. And then you work on that and only that until that's done. Then when you have that, it's like, okay, now that I got my guitar, what's the next thing I'm ready to do? Well, I'm certainly ready to learn 3 chords. And now you can start to see how the process starts to work. And what people often don't recognize is that when you look, people want to look at everything now because they think it's going to be faster. But to cordon things down to the first thing you're ready to do and do all of that, then the next thing, then the next thing, it actually accelerates you towards the things that you want.
I think it's fascinating how you kind of push people to make peace with defeat before they even take the first step. I think that's such a powerful concept, and one that you don't see most institutions of learning kind of talking about at the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely true.
All right, so I imagine first, how many children has Hack Studio worked with to date? How many people are involved in the project?
I'm not entirely sure of the numbers. We opened in the fall of 2015, and I'm estimating we've worked with about 150 to 160 kids.
All right, so in those 150, 160, I imagine it's kind of a shock for you to ask them what they want to do. I mean, that's kind of the opposite of most of the way, as you mentioned, the pedagogy of learning operates. How do you kind of coach them up to figuring out what it is they're truly, authentically interested in?
It's a really good question, and the honest to God truth is I was surprised by the fact that was a hard question for people to answer. I have to admit that, because I was the kind of person who always had an answer to that question. I assumed that was something that everyone was carrying around, and I think it's as much a function of my personality as it is a function of my age. I'm 44 years old, born in 1972, grew up in the late 70s and early 80s. When I was the age of the younger of the kids that come here, and that was that level of daydreaming. I know what I want to do if I'm given the chance to do whatever I feel like. Was pretty common where I grew up in my friend group and my age. What we've learned is that is a very difficult question for a large number of kids. We have a lot who come in ready to roll and know exactly what they want to do, but the kids for whom that is not a clear there is no clear tug toward a particular thing. What we do is we offer them the opportunity to iterate, but knowing that we're pushing in the direction of something that, I use the term deep meaning, but I recognize that term tends to carry more weight than I want to imbue it with. Deep meaning to me means that you really just feel like you got to do it right now. It doesn't mean it's your life's purpose or what you're going to do for the rest of your life or anything like that. Like a kid who wants to spend all day vegging out to video games. I believe that has deep meaning to them. They want to do that really badly. That's something they really want to get done. And so I think everybody has some things that they really do want to accomplish. Whether the adults in their lives are going to agree that those are worthwhile is a different matter. But to us, the thing that matters is that they want it. And when you've got something you want, then we've got the key to all that great learning and growth. So how do we do it? We say, what do you think you want to do? Don't know? Maybe try something. If you do something and it turns out that you don't want to do it, great, that's great data. We're closer to what you actually want to do. And it's about being at peace with the possibility of failure. The key is, like, one of our mantras around here is, if you don't know what to do something. Just do something. Any forward motion is going to be giving you data to help clarify.
So I've been hearing you kind of sprinkle in some of these words that you don't hear very often in a school context, like quest and like, what do you want to do, and some of these other things. Was that the plan to come at this with kind of new terminology from the beginning, or did that evolve along the way?
Well, I think we needed to come up with some different words than you hear in school, because we very decidedly wanted to differentiate ourselves from the school experience. I think we've succeeded at that in some ways, and we failed at it in some ways, and we're always trying to learn and grow ourselves. We're in the middle of our own Hack Studio project right here, and we definitely don't have it all figured out yet. Actually, one of the things I'm proudest about is that we're very transparent about that with our kids and families. We issue a lot of apologies around here for the things that we get wrong, and we try to work hand in hand with kids to make the experience what they need it to be. But the key is having people come into Hack Studio with a feeling that this is just extra school or just another level of school closes them off to opportunity. And so we want to use different words for that reason.
That makes sense. So I imagine you kind of talked about maybe a student would or a participant in Hack Studio would want to just veg out on the couch and play video games all day. I imagine there's some tension between what the children want to do sometimes and what their parents want them to do,
Yep.
as is probably present in any learning or education environment. How do you try to influence the parents to be open-minded or get them to change?
We actually have a great way of addressing it that works for everybody. One of the rules in Hack Studio is that you cannot undertake a project until all concerns that project raises are addressed. So I love that. Like, I want to just veg on the couch all day as a project. Awesome. Let's name it. I, as a mentor at Hack Studio, I don't have many concerns about that. The only issue is that our framework for the definition of done, there's 3 criteria. Active. How are we going to address active? Active, executable, and verifiable, and pointed toward your quest. Maybe your quest is to be better rested, which is a great quest. So the question is, how is that active from our standpoint? But then if the parent is concerned about it, and they don't want you to be, like, that's your project, they don't want you to be taking that project, all they have to do is voice the concern. And then that becomes part of our work. So you say, okay, so your parents are concerned that you're going to, I don't know, that you're going to lose muscle mass, or you're going to gain a lot of weight, or your brain's going to turn to mush, and it's not going to be time well spent. The kid, the participant, will write down all the concerns, and then the project can begin as soon as all the concerns are addressed. So now the kid is motivated. If they really are serious about wanting to spend all their time vegging on the couch, we've got a passion now for figuring out, how are you going to maintain your physical health? How are you going to maintain your mental health in order to address this concern from your parents? And the parent is getting now is now having their kid addressing the very things that make them say no to some of those things. And they're teaching themselves about those environmental factors, where if you just say, Dad, can I just hang out on the couch all day? No, that's like the end of the thing. You say, yeah. And as soon as you figure out how you're going to stay in shape, how you're going to stay mentally sharp, all those things, you can figure that out, sure. Go ahead and sit on the couch all day.
And I imagine that probably just having that conversation and kind of dissecting this kind of somewhat silly idea in a very formal way probably shows the parents that the child has motivation for this that maybe they don't show for other things in their lives.
Yeah. Most common is a kid goes, oh, I see what my parents are talking about. And they go, okay, forget it. And that's a great outcome. But there have been some times, like, for instance, we had a kid here who wanted to make a functioning crossbow. And so, of course, obvious concerns arise. This is a public space. You can see behind me, we've got, this is Hack Studio behind me. We've got a lot of open space, and people work where they can see each other. We're all sharing this space. So this guy's going to be start firing crossbows around in here. I don't want people to get hurt, and I'm concerned about you getting hurt by the contraption. I'm concerned someone else being hurt by the projectile. I'm concerned about, and so on and so forth. Often kids will be like, okay, yeah, no, I see, forget it. This kid was like, okay. He took each one of them and he just figured out a way to address them. He designed a cordoned off space to do his firing testing where it would fire at the wall where there'd be no one near it. He had like caution tape that was going around. He changed the design of the projectile from something that would be long and sharp to something short, blunt, and light, so that it, if it accidentally hit someone, it wouldn't do too much damage. And on and on and on. He addressed everything that needed to be done. He spent a couple of 2-hour sessions working through just the addressing of those concerns, and that was the valuable learning and growth, essentially. Yeah, it's great that he got this crossbow made, because that's another big part of what we want to do. We want people that emerge from our program with the identity that they can get things done. But think about all this other great self-discovery, self-awareness, agency, responsibility, all these other things that came as byproducts in the way that math came as a byproduct to trying to solve the helix arch problem. That growth comes in a very engaging way, rather than just slogging through it and painful, and the ways that I remember suffering through a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was in school.
So you've been working on this project now for better part of 2 years, a little over 2 years, or longer actually, and probably some of the planning phases and things.
Yeah, since I started pursuing something in the direction of this, it's been since 2007.
Wow. All right. So 10 years. What when you think back on that 10 years, what have you learned about yourself in bringing this to life?
What have I learned about myself? I have learned. Wow, that's a good question. Well, one thing that I've always known, but has been made very plain to me, is that I don't know everything. I knew that at the beginning, but I'm reminded of it daily. That I don't know everything. That the best ideas come through iteration. That our first idea will be a good start, but we're going to increase our knowledge. We're going to learn more stuff. We're going to have our expectations violated in ways that improve what we're trying to accomplish. So I've had that lesson solidified. I've learned that there is value to pursuing a crazy idea. This crazy idea that you can start with what the quote unquote student wants. That it's backwards what we do. A lot of what we do, not just that. A lot of what we do at Hack Studio is just backwards. And I talked to a lot of people in the early stages of trying to bring this idea out, very well-intentioned people who were looking to help me by saying, it's backwards, it's wrong, it's not going to work. It's like no one's going to be able to do that. And what I've learned is that there's value in sticking with it and to continue to keep pushing through it and to keep. I don't want to say defend. I don't want to say protect. I want to persevere with the idea, to give it the space it needs to have the effect that you think it's going to have. There's a quote that innovation requires people to do things that are unreasonable. And it's very much been the experience that I've had trying to get Hack Studio off the ground.
That's interesting. All right, so just a couple more questions. I definitely want to be respectful of your time today. So for parents that see this and are like, want to cheerlead you, and maybe children, young adults that watch this, how can they support you if they're not maybe necessarily living in the Chicago area?
Well, they can just let people know about it. Hackstudio.com is our website. I have a blog where I've got a little bit of writing up there. I'd like to populate a little bit more. But they can tell people about it. If they think it's an interesting idea, to share it. I think one of our biggest challenges is people, knowing that we exist, so that they can become engaged, and then learning about and understanding what it is we do. And so the more people can be talking about that and sharing that with each other, the better that helps us.
All right, great. And then for those same folks, if you were to tell them or point them in the direction of a book or a movie or a video where they can kind of continue to learn about this idea or the ideas of Hack Studio or something in that realm, where would you point them?
I got a ton of books. I would just recommend to anyone listening to read the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. It's not a direct correlation to what we do, but we use a lot of what she's what her research has unearthed about vulnerability and connection between people, and the value of those things. Other things that have influenced what Hack Studio does are books like The Way We're Working Isn't Working by Tony Schwartz. I would say the Heath brothers books. They got a bunch of books, Made to Stick, Switch, where they do a great job of consolidating a lot of the last 30 years of psychological research into very understandable language. But I think those books would be a great place to start.
Cool, that's great. Well, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, for the time that you took to talk to me today. I'll be cheering you on. Please let me know how I can help in the future as you continue to grow.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the interest, and good luck with this.